Here's a staggering truth. What was holding me back in my fantasy writing for a long time wasn't lack of creativity or writing skill. It was following advice that sounds right, but actually kills stories before they ever see the light of day. So in this video, I'm sharing 9 game-changing tips that actually helped me finish multiple novels. Just one of these tips could be the missing secret that will allow you to do the same. And to kick things off, let me tell you something about breaking rules. I learned that lesson during my second novel attempt many years ago. I followed every rule I'd read about epic fantasy, included a sprawling world, ancient prophecy, a chosen one, and world-ending threats. After all, it was a story about magical bloodlines and political power. Surely it needed to be epic in scope, right? But pages upon pages later, I realized that something was missing. The story I actually wanted to tell. While the epic elements were there, the heart of my story was more intimate, about family, legacy, and the personal price of power. I'd blown up this scope thinking that's what fantasy required, when my core themes would have resonated more strongly in a focused narrative about one noble's house struggle with their magical heritage. The moment I gave myself permission to write epic fantasy at a more intimate scale, things clicked. The magic and everything else felt much more real because it served the emotional heart of the story, not the other way around. I kept the epic elements that mattered, the complex magic, the political intrigue, but viewed through the lens of personal stakes rather than world-ending threats. You see, rules are there for a reason. They give guidance. But following theory blindly only allows you to tell a story. It doesn't necessarily allow you to tell your story. So here are 4 practical steps on how you can use this insight right now to strengthen your own novel. First, analyze your favorite fantasy books. What rules do they break? Look specifically for successful books that ignore common requirements. Note how they replace epic scope with deeper emotional impact, and pay attention to what makes them compelling despite breaking conventions. Second then, list your own story's non-traditional elements. Don't just catalog differences. Examine why each unique element matters. Consider how these elements serves your story's emotional core, and identify which rules you're breaking for a purpose versus out of uncertainty. Next, instead of asking, is this proper fantasy, ask, does this serve my story? Evaluate each element based on its contribution to your core themes. Then consider how it affects character development and emotional impact, and test whether it strengthens or dilutes your story's unique voice. And as step 4, embrace your unique perspective. Draw from your personal experiences and cultural background. Identify what excites you most about your story idea, and build your own distinctive interests and passions. But breaking free from rules is just the beginning. Once you start exploring different approaches to fantasy, you'll face another crucial decision: how to handle magic in your story. And this is where a lot of writers get stuck. You see, magic systems are like rivers. Some are carefully channeled and controlled, with clear paths and defined boundaries. Perfect when your story needs reliable rules. Others flow wild and free, their power mysterious and unpredictable. Ideal for stories where wonder matters more than mechanics. Your task isn't choosing which is better, but understanding what kind of flow your story needs. Understanding this flow means looking at how magic shapes your story's landscape. Consider healing magic. A structured magic system might require specific ingredients, precise incantations, and clear energy costs. A mysterious system might tie healing to emotional connection, phases of the moon, or the land's vitality. The shape of your magic system emerges from how it serves your story's heart. Let me show you how this works in practice by examining a single magical element, the ability to share memories through touch. In a structured approach, you might establish that memory sharing drains energy proportional to the memory's age, only works with willing participants, requires skin-to-skin contact, and can't be used on the dead. These rules create specific story opportunities. A character might need to share crucial information but lack the energy. Another might have to convince someone to share willingly. The limitations generate plot points and force creative solutions. But what if we let this same ability flow more freely? In a mysterious system, memory sharing might respond to emotional need rather than conscious control. Work unpredictably with the dead, revealing unexpected truth. Leave traces of shared memories linger in places or objects, and create unintended connections between people. Here the magic's unpredictability drives the story. Characters can't rely on magic to solve problems directly, but its mysterious nature creates deeper questions about connection, memory, and truth. The key isn't choosing between structure and mystery, but understanding how each approach serves your story's needs. Consider asking yourself, does my plot rely on characters cleverly using magical rules to solve problems? If that's the case, then you need clearer boundaries. If you instead ask yourself, does my story explore themes of wonder, cost, or unintended consequences? Well, a yes here would mean that a more mysterious approach might better serve these goals. And now that we understand magic, let me show you why you might be approaching world building from exactly the wrong direction. Think of your fantasy world like a theater stage. You can build an elaborate set first and then write a play to fit it, or you can start with your story and build exactly the stage elements you need. Both approaches work, but here's the key: every set piece should still matter to your performance. From my point of view, it's important to start with purpose rather than detail. Your world exists to serve your story. Let me show you how this works in practice through two contrasting approaches to the same tale. A story about a society built on floating cities where the truth about their creation is a carefully guarded lie. In the story first example, starting with the emotional core of uncovering societal deception, you'd build your world by asking, what founding myth keeps the cities in the sky? How do the ruling families maintain this deception? What hidden technology or magic actually keeps the cities afloat? Or which group benefits from preserving the lie and which suffer? In the world first example, on the other hand, starting with the floating cities themselves, you'd connect the story by asking, how does the altitude-based hierarchy reflect the myth's influence? What ancient mechanisms in the city's foundation might reveal the truth? How do different social classes experience and perpetuate the founding lie? Or what daily rituals and customs reinforce people's belief in the myth? Whether you start with the story's emotional heart or the world's physical reality, the key is weaving them together. The floating cities aren't interesting just because they float. They're compelling because of how their existence shapes beliefs, maintains power structure, and creates the perfect setting for a tale about uncovering truth. Remember, you don't need to answer every possible question about your world. You need to answer the questions that matter to your story. But here's where things get interesting, and where many writers hit a wall. Once you've got your world taking shape, you face what seems like an impossible choice between character and plot. Except, it's not really a choice at all if you ask me. Let me show you why. My breakthrough with character and plot came during an extended writing block. Every scene felt disconnected, either advancing the plot but leaving characters flat, or deepening characters while the story stalled. The solution emerged from an unexpected place: my protagonist's fear of heights. What started as a character detail became the key to the climax, forcing her to face a fear to save her city. Her personal growth and the plot's resolution became inseparable, each making the other more powerful. Understanding this deep connection between character development and plot progression opens up exciting possibilities for your story. The character-plot momentum cycle works like this. First, you have character growth that leads to plot development. For example, when your protagonist faces their fear of fire magic, they discover new capabilities. This reveals hidden plot elements, which creates new external challenges and leads to more opportunities for growth. Plot events, on the other hand, then create character development. When your protagonist fails to save their mentor, they question their abilities. This affects future decisions, which influences plot direction and creates new personal challenges. This interconnected approach ensures that every major story beat serves both character development and plot progression. The key is finding these natural connections between external events and internal growth. A truly compelling scene should change both the situation and the character, in my opinion. If it only does one, try to look deeper for opportunities to layer in the other. But speaking of characters, let me tackle one of the biggest challenges in fantasy writing next. One that even experienced writers struggle with. How do you create non-human characters that actually feel real without just making them humans with pointy ears? I once wrote the beginning of a story where every non-human character was just a human with pointy ears. Eventually I learned to ask deeper questions, such as how does their lifespan affect their view of time? How does their physiology shape their culture? These questions transformed flat archetypes into compelling characters, because the insights about non-human characters can radically transform how you approach their development. Let me walk you through the process using a practical example. Consider the creation of a non-human character, an ancient tree guardian who recently gained mobility. First, we have their physical reality. Centuries rooted in one place shape their perception of time, seasons rather than hours, their understanding of progress, cycles rather than linear, and their concept of urgency. What's a day to someone who's lived 500 years? Now mobile, they struggle with the wasteful speed of human movement, the strange concept of traveling to find knowledge. the chaos of creatures that don't stay in their proper places. From their physical reality, we move to its social translation. The unique perspective creates natural conflict through communication gaps, for example. A human might say, "We need an answer by tomorrow," while the Guardian replies with, "Ah yes, when the next sun cycle begins." The why rush? The last time I made a quick decision, I regretted it for 80 years. Beyond this, we also have value clashes though. Human value progress and change. Our Guardian values stability and cycles. Neither is wrong, but the contrast creates story opportunities. The key is letting these differences drive story moments. Don't just describe their alienness, show how it affects every interaction and decision. A truly compelling non-human character shouldn't just think differently, if you ask me. Their unique perspective should challenge human characters' assumptions and create meaningful conflict. Which brings us to something crucial that shapes every character, human or not: their cultural background. Understanding this connection will transform how you write characters forever. I tend to focus on these elements: values and beliefs, social expectations, traditional practices, and personal rebellion points. This deep understanding of cultural influence opens up rich possibilities for character development. Here's a practical method for weaving culture into your character's every action and decision. Before writing any scene, ask yourself, what would their culture consider the right way to handle this? How does their cultural background affect their initial reaction? What cultural taboos might they be breaking or preserving, and which traditions gives them strength or hold them back? Consider this sequence of scenes showing cultural influence in action. First, we have a morning ritual scene. On the surface level, the character performs a traditional blessing. As a deeper meaning, it shows their connection to heritage. In terms of internal conflict, the character rushes through it feeling guilty. And looking at story impact, this sets up later conflict about tradition versus urgency. Or take a formal diner scene. Here we have the cultural expectation of specific seating arrangements by status. The character's choice of deliberately sitting in the wrong place. Then there is an immediate impact because it creates social tension, which gives us a character revelation by showing their growing rebellion against norms. And with that kind of cultural understanding in mind, let me now show you something that will open up whole new possibilities for your story. The different types of fantasy you can write, and why they matter more than you might think. Think of fantasy subgenres as different lenses for viewing the same scene. Epic fantasy uses a wide lens to capture sweeping landscapes of possibility. Urban fantasy zooms in close, finding magic in city shadows. Each lens reveals different truths, different possibilities, and the real power comes from knowing when to switch between them. Let me show you what I mean. Imagine a story about a magical inheritance that threatens to tear a family apart. At its core, it's about legacy, power, and the cost of tradition. Watch how different subgenres transform this same emotional core. Epic fantasy amplifies the stakes. The inheritance is an ancient power that once protected the realm. The family's internal struggle could destabilize magical barriers, keeping ancient threats at bay. Personal conflict echoes through prophecies and politics, making private pain into a public catastrophe. Urban fantasy, on the other hand, makes it immediate. Set in a modern metropolis, the inheritance is tied to the city's magical infrastructure. Family members battle through corporate boardrooms and back alleys, their personal drama threatening to expose magic to a world that's forgotten it exists. Dark fantasy then explores consequences. Suddenly the inheritance could carry a terrible price, each generation gaining power by sacrificing what they love most. The family struggle becomes a brutal examination of what power is worth and who we become when we pursue it at any cost. The beauty of understanding these subgenres isn't about choosing one path, it's about knowing which elements serve your story's emotional truth. Choose the lens that makes your story's heart beat strongest. But bringing these elements to life requires more than just choosing the right subgenre. You need to make your world feel lived in and real, especially in the quiet moments. Let me show you how. A simple tea warming spell changed my entire approach to fantasy world building. Writing what I thought would be a throwaway scene, I realized this minor magic had spawned unique customs, influenced social hierarchies, and created new professions. No epic battles or world-ending threats, just the fascinating ripple effects of magic in everyday life. That scene revealed to me how small magical details could make a world feel more real than any grand magical system. But bringing magic into everyday life requires a shift in perspective. The real magic of world building happens in life's quiet moments. Think about your morning routine, making breakfast, getting ready for work, maybe tending your garden. Now imagine how magic might weave through these simple tasks, not just changing how they're done, but reshaping the entire culture around them. Take cooking for example. A simple self-stirring pot sounds convenient, right? But follow that thread further. Suddenly you have cooking competitions where the skill isn't in the stirring, but in the timing of spells. Family recipes include not just ingredients, but magical techniques passed down through generations. Some traditionalists might insist food tastes better with hand stirring, while modernists champion magical efficiency. Or consider something as basic as cleaning. A charm that repels dirt seems straightforward until you realize how it might reshape social hierarchies. When magical cleaning becomes the norm, what happens to traditional cleaning services? Maybe you develop a class divide between those who can afford permanent cleanliness charms and those who must renew cheaper temporary ones. The key is thinking through not just how magic makes things easier, but how it creates new complications. For every magical solution, look for the new problems it spawns. Most importantly, consider how ordinary people interact with these magical conveniences. Are there magic maintenance services for when your self-stirring pot develops a wobble? Do people take classes to learn basic magical repairs? What traditions and superstitions evolve around these everyday enchantments? If you ask me, it's these small daily interactions with magic that make your world feel real. Moving on, let me show you one last fundamental aspect. Despite all its magical elements, great fantasy connects because it reveals emotional truth. That is a fundamental belief I have. And because of this, I use what I call the resonance test. Universal experience, something everyone can relate to. Fantastic element, your unique magical or world-building twist. And emotional core, the deeper truth being explored. When these three elements align, stories become both magical and deeply true in my opinion. The power of emotional truth transforms fantasy from mere escapism into stories that resonate deeply. Let me show you this with a practical example of emotional mapping through story layers. On the surface layer, a dragon attacks a village. In terms of personal stakes, we have the protagonist's sister leading the village defenses. Then there's the relationship dynamic. Both siblings haven't spoken in years. Which brings us to internal conflict because the protagonist fled a previous attack. And that brings us to the universal truth. Courage means facing our shame. So how do we build this kind of emotional resonance into our stories? It starts with truth, your truth. Think about a moment when you faced failure, when you had to rebuild yourself from the ground up. There's raw emotional power in that experience, the fear, the shame, but also the hope that carried you through. That's the foundation we can build on. Those genuine emotions become the heart of your fantasy elements. A moment of betrayal transforms into a broken magical oath, carrying all the weight of that original pain you felt. The feeling of loss could become a mage whose powers are fading. Your personal growth could take shape as the mastery of a new kind of magic. Suddenly we're not using magic to hide from real emotions, we're using it to illuminate them, to make them impossible to ignore. When you achieve this fusion of fantasy and feeling, that's when your story becomes unforgettable. At least for me. But having said this, the truth is that most writing advice still keeps you spinning your wheels, rewriting endlessly or drowning in world building, because going from theory to practice is hard. So watch this video here next where I reveal the exact framework that helped me break free and finish multiple novels.